So good evening, everybody. This is our July 6th meeting right after the holiday. I hope everybody had a nice holiday. I'm just going to jump right into it. So we'll call the meeting to order. It's now 6:32. And first order of business is present to speak. If you would like to speak, just unmute yourself and tell us who you are and what you'd like to say. Matt?
Hi, Matthew Clark, 42 Burleson Road, Willington, Connecticut. So I don't quite understand something. Maybe you guys can address it in your conversation tonight. I don't understand how this committee can meet for a year, over a year, about building a new school or rebuilding the whole school and not have education requirements. I would think that would be
not have education what?
Requirements, specifications.
Oh, okay.
I don't understand how that's possible. I would think that would be the first thing that you would do. I remember attending your first meeting. It was cold outside, so that's probably year and a half ago. I guess it was a year and a half ago. And you guys still don't have education specs? I don't understand how that can be. And how is our education consultant working on a school building plans with no education specs? Is he working without? I mean, I don't understand. How do you work without knowing what you're building? This sounds like foot dragging to me, to be quite honest. Why else would there be more than a year to develop ed specs? I'm curious also, what specifications did Mr. Toulis use to start his work? Did he get access to the plans for Hall School or the education specifications? Where did he start off with? So I mentioned, I see on the agenda tonight that you're going to be talking about presentations to townspeople. I'd like to see at least 4 different presentations to the town on the school building committee's work. Mansfield had 6 for their project, so I don't think 4 is anything out of the ordinary. And then I would expect the committee to then react and change your plans based on the needs and desires expressed by the townspeople. I have a couple other things. We have 2 schools right now that appear to be slightly over half capacity. The process for planning and rebuilding of Hall School should include moving Hall School students to Center School while construction is underway. I don't see any need or reason why we need to hold extra space at Hall while construction is moving ahead. We can move those children, those kids, to Center School. It seems appropriate to me. Keeping space at Hall is just, and I look at it, and unless you can come up with a reason why, it seems to me to be an attempt to increase the cost of building on Hall School to make it unattractive. Holding that space, lots of space, that we don't need. We can move the kids to Center School during construction. Maybe I'm wrong. Feel free to specify the educational need with a bibliography of supporting evidence and documentation, specifying why grammar school students or grammar school classrooms can't be used to teach middle schoolers. It makes sense to me. So we're going to need both Hall School and Center School for the next few years, 3 or 4 years. And the SBC and the Board of Education I think, are doing a disservice to our children by making the kids attend schools with leaking roofs. I would urge you to apply to the ARPA Commission now for funds to partially or fully repair our school roofs. It's already been approved at town meeting. It seems like a no-brainer to me. On the agenda, it appears that this committee will be meeting in secret yet again, or executive session yet again, to evaluate buying a property for a new school. And that makes, I don't know, what, 8, 9, 10 times? I have not seen any concrete results at all on rebuilding Hall School. None. The only thing I've seen is volunteer work done by a lifelong resident here and a practicing engineer, Mr. Toulis. And it appears that Mr. Toulis did that work with no education specifications. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I see Donna Cook's hand up. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, Donna Cook, 77 Common Road. I've got a couple concerns. One is I would love to see Hall School reconfigured just because I'm really concerned about the blight the empty buildings will have on the community. So I'd like to know the options. And get the feeling that the committee as a whole is not taking the possibility of reconfiguring Hall School as a viable option and seriously
Donna,
considering it.
Yeah, Donna, if I can just interrupt, we are
Sure.
considering both. I know this isn't a back and forth session, but this committee is tasked with looking at both options.
Well,
So,
I'm also
I'm
okay,
sorry to interrupt.
and
Go ahead.
I'm also concerned, and this is perception can become reality even if it's not true. I'm concerned that there's a conflict of interest with Colliers and the very, very large plot of land on 32 that is being considered for the giant warehouse, because they're also involved with that. And then if the giant warehouse goes in and we have 500 more employees in Willington, if other land starts getting developed and lots of people move in because they want to live close to where they work, then the new school will be way undersized by the time it's done. And I've lived someplace where that happened. And so you get the brand new school, it's way too small, but you did it because you thought you had to. And then we have to go in for a second phase of expansions and building of another building when Hall is huge and could actually accommodate a large influx of population. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone else present to speak? I don't see any hands up, but there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting if you want to wait towards the end, but I'll call it one more time. Anybody want to speak before we move on? Okay, I'll move on to Chairperson Report. So we did have a question about the recording secretary that we currently have. And it was funded through June or it was, I don't know what you call it, appointed or appropriated through June, and it had to get renewed. The First Selectman has confirmed that we do have money in the First Selectman budget to cover the recording secretary through the end of the year. But just a heads up to the rest of the committee members, we may have to fund that recording secretary after the end of this year. That's just a heads up update. I don't know, Erica, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to clarify, so it was included in this fiscal year. So the fiscal year is July 1 to June 30. So we have funding for this current fiscal year. And as long as the school building committee, I would continue to include it in the budget at that point. And at our, in a meeting in June before the term expired, we did renew our recording secretary's term. So she too is renewed through the fiscal year.
And that is through June of 2023.
So July 1 through June 30. And so our procedure, our policy is to do those recording secretaries on an annual basis. And so the term begins July 1.
Okay, so we're good until 2023 then, is that right?
Correct. And we would still continue in this cycle. We would, as long as you had a recording secretary to bring forth at the time, if this building committee still exists next year, we would continue with the same thing. And I would continue to allocate or ask for funding to be allocated within the selectmen's budget.
Great, thank you. The other information that I received from one of our board members, as mentioned earlier in the meeting, is Erica Bouchard has resigned. So that does leave up an open position for this committee. I do believe we did get some correspondence from a Willington resident who is interested in being on the board. And I'll be honest with you.
Erica's seat was filling a member of the staff. So her replacement would need to be another staff member from the
I see.
Willington Board of Ed.
Okay. And I'm unfamiliar with that process, Erica, so just wanted to update the rest of the committee members that that is a position that's open. I'm not sure, since most of us were appointed by the first selectman's office, I'm assuming that this open position will also be appointed by yourself.
No, it would be by the Board of Selectmen. So we go back to Phil and ask him to communicate with his staff to bring forth a new name, and then it would go to the Board of Selectmen, not myself.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to give a shout out to Kelsey for, she's going to be doing the meetings for the next, meeting minutes for the next couple meetings, as our original note taker is just on vacation, or she'll be out that week. I think that's all I have for chairperson report. So let's move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. First item is the SBC Land Assessment Committee from the March 14th meeting. Is there a motion on the table to approve these?
Hang on, we can't approve those. I just issued those meetings minutes out to the subcommittee members today. I just got home from vacation last night and I emailed them out. So they'll go out to the town clerk tomorrow. So we can't approve them until the town clerk has posted them publicly for 24 hours.
Okay, so we'll table this
So-
item for our next meeting then. Thank you, Mike. Ralph, did you have a question?
Just on those minutes, Mike, did you get my email?
I see your email. I haven't read it yet, but I see it.
It's just one spelling error, that's all. Nothing essential.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the SBC meeting minutes of June 1st. Is there a motion of the table to approve the SBC meeting minutes of June 1st? And
I move that we approve the SBC meeting minutes for June 1st, 2022.
thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mike. All in favor?
Whoa,
Oh, I'm
discussion?
sorry, discussion. Thank you.
All right. I have a request on the minutes, and I've been through this before. Page numbers would be very, very helpful. It didn't seem like Nicole did that last time. I also think whoever is the recording secretary should be listed as present for the meeting. And that was not the case in these meeting minutes.
Well, they're not, Ralph, they're not always in attendance. So sometimes the meeting minutes are recorded from, are taken after.
Okay,
Based on the
that's fine.
recording. Okay.
That's fine. In addition, page 3, midway down the page, Superintendent Stevens discussed the impact on student learning as a big factor to consider too. All right, never mind. I read the sentence wrong. Forget it. My
Anything
error.
else, Ralph? Anything else?
No.
Okay. So my apologies. So discussion, is there any other discussion on the June 1st meeting minutes before we take a vote? Okay, seeing none. Let's take a vote. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes of June 1st, 2022, say aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Can I make, I don't know if how the board feels if we want a separate motion. There were committee meeting minutes from the Communications Subcommittee from April 28th. Were those, I don't see that we've approved those yet.
And those were, do you remember, I
And to
don't,
the committee,
were those
this-
tabled for a specific reason?
I don't know that they've ever been on the agenda,
Okay.
so
Can we put them on the agenda for,
either make a motion to approve them, or do we feel like it needs to be a whole separate item added to the agenda? It falls under approval of meeting minutes.
yeah, I would like to see it as an added item.
So I'll move to add the 428 Communications Subcommittee minutes as item 4C.
Okay. Your second? I'll second it. Any discussion on those meeting minutes? Well, I guess we have to vote to add it and then we have to vote to approve it, right? Okay, so we're gonna vote to add the approval of the Communications Subcommittee meeting minutes of April 28th. Erica had a motion on the table. I seconded it. And so now all in favor to add this item to the agenda, say aye.
I,
Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Item is added.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 28th of the Communications Subcommittee.
Is there a second? Mike? Okay, any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes from the Subcommittee Communications of April 28, 2022, say aye.
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 I,
Any nays?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, motion carries to approve those meeting minutes. Thank you very much, Erica. So we'll move down to communications. As I mentioned in my chairperson's report, we did receive some communication of an interested member, town of Willington resident that is interested. And as far as what role they serve, as Erica mentioned, they have to be a staff member. I'm not sure, I guess at this point we'll send that information over to Erica and Phil and to confirm that they are a staff member. I mean, I got it via email. So I'm not sure.
That's a resident that's interested, Catherine, the one that you received. That's not a staff member.
But they could also be a staff member, right? I don't really know this person, so we just have to confirm.
It is not a staff member.
Okay. Mike?
I think you're right, Catherine. This is an administrative thing. We don't even need to debate it. As chair,
Yeah.
you just send it to the appointing authority and then they figure out if it's relevant.
Exactly. Okay. So that's all I had for communications. So under subcommittee reports, we'll move on. So there's 3 items here as a standing agenda items. Any reports or updates from the Communications Subcommittee?
no, not at this time.
Okay. How about the land assessment?
Very briefly, we haven't met recently because we're waiting for the agenda item that comes up later in this meeting. The land assessment subcommittee has been in communication, working on dates to continue our process. A couple of things we have coming up that will be public meetings, not an executive session, because they involve publicly owned property. We'll be doing the, I don't know if you want to call it final assessment, but the in-person assessment of the Youngerman property on Route 320 North. As has already been discussed, we don't believe that property to be appropriate for development of this type. However, as chair of the subcommittee, I've been very clear on the fact that since the town owns it, if we're not going to use it, we need to be very clear on why. And we need to have set foot on the property to explain why we would not use that property. So that is upcoming. We're working on scheduling it. It will be publicly noticed so that, you know, it'll be a public meeting. And the same thing will happen with the current Hall Memorial School property. We will have a subcommittee meeting to walk that property and again, discuss the assessment of the property, what attributes it has or doesn't have for the process going forward. Again, that'll be a public meeting. People will be able to attend if they choose. In person, obviously, we can't walk around Zooming the meeting. So that is ongoing. And then obviously the agenda item coming up for the potential of appraising a piece of property. As far as the Land Assessment Subcommittee is concerned, we are not locked into any one option yet. Just as the committee has, the full committee has directed us, our job is to look at the potential pieces, including existing pieces. And that is the path we are still on.
Thank you, Mike. Is
You're
there a tentative date for our next land assessment committee?
Well, it's right now it's getting together the members to be able to do those 2 site walks.
Okay.
And obviously, depending what happens with this meeting tonight, if we have actionable items from this meeting to work on.
Okay.
I have our schedule.
Okay, and just a clarification, the agenda items that we put on our land assessment committee and also on this committee for executive session is a placeholder, and we don't necessarily go into executive session each time. It's basically a
Correct.
placeholder in case something comes up and you know we become aware of a private piece of property, we are able to discuss it in executive session. So just because it's on the agenda, it doesn't necessarily mean we've gone into it every single time.
That is correct. And when I submit the minutes of the Land Assessment Subcommittee to this committee for approval, they do indicate whether we went into the executive session and then back out, or they would indicate that the executive session was not needed and we did not adjourn to it and come back in that case. It's addressed in the minutes either way.
Right. Okay, thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
All right, and last but not least, the Finance Subcommittee. Peter, any update? I just want to unmute. I'm sorry, I didn't read your lips. If you could just unmute.
I'm sorry, nothing at this time.
Okay. Okay, down to old business, owner's project manager update.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Evening, everyone. Scott Pellman, Collier's project leaders. Since our last meeting, if you recall, the committee did authorize Collier's to solicit proposals for phase 1 site environmental reviews. I did receive those. I had forwarded those on to Catherine for potential distribution to the committee. We reached out to 4 different firms. Fuss & O'Neill said that they were not interested. TRC, Eagle and Langen. TRC, Eagle and Langen all confirmed within actual conversations I had with staff employees that they were planning on submitting. Right at the very end, TRC then declined due to the extent of work that they were pursuing. So we did get 2 proposals, one from Eagle, one from Langen, to do both the Hall Memorial School site and what we're currently calling Parcel 1, again, which was the privately owned parcel, which we can't still at this point openly discuss. Both firms are qualified. There was a bit of a cost difference. We've worked extensively with both firms. I don't think we're necessarily looking for action on it tonight, but when the time comes, I think based on the qualifications and the submitted costs, Eagle, which is the lower of the 2 numbers, would be the recommended consultant for pursuing those phase 1 environmental reviews. We continue to develop very preliminary estimates, schedules. Really, at this point, we're really kind of waiting, and I think may get discussed a little further down the agenda as far as our opportunities for privately owned parcels. Certainly, we're going to be participating with Mike and the Sites Committee to do those walks of Home Memorial in the Youngerman property. I do have preliminary estimates. A number of things have been generated. So I think once we get an ed spec and a little bit better handle on the land, hopefully I think this committee will be able to release quite a bit of information out to the public. It may need to be modified slightly. But again, our task is to develop schedules, overall project costs, communicate the differences and approaches to the committee. Again, we're not, I think there's still some confusion. So I'm just going to take a moment to say that, Colliers is an owner's project manager. We're not the architect. We weren't hired to design a building. We're basing the estimates on current square footage, current bids of projects that we're managing to date, escalating those, looking at the future date when the projects may be constructed. When an option is chosen by the public and a budget is defined, the architect will be handed that budget and the ed spec and the appropriate parcel of land, whether public or private, and they will be then directed to either do a renovation project or new project, again, whatever project that the community votes on in favor of pursuing. So again, we're not, you want to sort of dispel that we're not actually working on designs, but what the ed spec does is it defines the total square footage, total program areas, everything that Phil and the administration and the Board of Education believes is appropriate academically for a consolidated K-8 project. With that, I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Thank you, Scott. Was there any discussion about what Scott gave us for an update from the committee members? Peter?
Yes, if I could ask Scott this, Scott, I know you're developing both concepts, one on a new site and one at the Hall School site. And what I want to ask you is that Hall School site concept, does it incorporate a sub-concept, if I can call it that, where there is an entirely new school on that site, which is a premise I raised at our last meeting, because I think that's important for the committee to consider.
And Peter, I believe your thought was you would maintain the existing memorial school, the original 1900s turn of the century school, and would propose to put a separate freestanding school on the site. Is that the correct request?
Yes.
And again, I think we've presented the site plan in the past. It's very tight as far as development of the athletic fields. Once we put a new facility, if we put a new facility on that site and maintain the existing facility, there's not sufficient land to accommodate both, keeping the building and putting an entirely new school on that parcel of land.
Is that based on a one-floor facility?
No.
Even going up, we don't have sufficient space?
Correct. Not with the athletic facilities being baseball, softball, and overlapping soccer, which is a minimum you need for a middle school.
And what if the consideration is a complete removal of what's there, including the 1922 facility, and locating a new school there?
That option, as far as I understand, again, would need to be, I think, first reviewed and discussed with the trust. That is not something we felt was achievable or warranted. So again, that's not something we've can even considered. And I think you'd have to talk to Catherine about having somebody approach the trust about that question, and then we could respond.
Yeah, and I do know that there are deed restrictions on that property in that building has to be used as a school. So I think for us to propose a scenario in which we're demoing the school. I'm not sure that that is something the foundation would even consider. I understand where you're coming from, Peter, but I just don't, as a committee member, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable suggesting that as an option to tear down Hall and put a new school there. I'm not sure what the rest of the committee would feel about that, but yeah, it's an interesting concept, though. Did somebody else have their hand up, Mike?
Yeah, I think if we felt there was any room to start considering those options, we would need to be factoring in demo cost for that as well. So there'd be significant demolition cost, and maybe, you know, that's easy to say, no, we can't do it. I'm just saying we'd have to factor that in.
Yeah,
And
I think the biggest hurdle would be maintaining the existing school, because I did pose a question to Phil, which, you know, I'm sure he may be able to respond to it at another time. If there was capacity to bring more students down to center school, you know, the real key is keeping appropriate learning environments for the students of Willington, which would, by putting a new school on that site, you would have to maintain the existing school busing. You'd have to put it where the fields are. And then if you were going to put fields on, unfortunately, those fields would most likely have to go back where the existing building is. And again, then you get back into the discussions with the trust.
right. Was there any other feedback from the committee members? Anne?
I would be a little concerned if we did demolition the building, what was left behind in terms of toxic chemicals and all in such an old building.
Yeah, well, any project that we do, or when we touch that existing building in any way, the phase one site and will determine what, excuse me, is in the soils, the surrounding area. You do have a hazardous material management plan that the district has in place. If we were going to do any demolition and abatement, the state of Connecticut really has some very strict mandates of how you do it. You would hire an environmental consultant. They would take a lot of sampling. They would come up with an entire plan dedicated to material abatement, disposal. So all of that would be, you know, if that option was chosen, all of that would be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion from the members before we move on? Okay. I don't believe we have any discussion for our next item, which is potential executive session. This is for the purpose of discussion of the selection of a site. I don't have any new information that we would present in the executive session unless someone on the committee does. So we will just keep that on the agenda and move on. Item C, appraisal for potential school site. So I think in one of our last meetings, we had requested to seek out appraisals of a school. I believe this is for the private school site. And Mike, you want to offer an update, please?
Sure. After the direction of this committee and in consultation with Scott Pellman, I started pursuing appraisals for a parcel property that has been discussed in executive session that's privately owned, so we could determine a value as part of a potential process. The appraisal field, like a lot of other fields right now, is taxed with the way the economy has been running and staffing problems. I eventually contacted 7 different appraisers, and I got a lot of things like I'm too busy, or I pick and choose what I'm doing for work these days because I'm so busy and I don't pick you, polite, but that bluntly, or I'm retiring because I've had enough. And I eventually, out of the 7 people I got contact with, I got 1 proposal.
Oh, wow.
That is the proposal that the chair, that Catherine has. And since it is our only proposal, I can't even compare it to know if it's a reasonable price. But for our process to continue, if the committee, the overall committee feels we should continue to determine a value of this private parcel to see if it's worth negotiating when the time comes, then we'd have to authorize going forward with this appraisal and hiring this contractor.
Yeah, I think this appraisal, Mike, I'm not sure that it went to the entire committee, and since we only have one, I'm not sure if this is something that we should discuss in our land assessment committee first, if we want to pursue more so that we can compare it to a fair and reasonable market price for an appraisal.
Well, I think that's a challenging question because we talked to multiple local real estate agents
Right.
also and said, listen, you know the business, you find us a person.
Yeah,
They gave us suggestions, and even the suggestions they gave us came back and said, no, too bad. You know, again, it was the same thing. It was, I'm retiring, I've had enough, I have too much work, things like that. One guy that I called, the phone line was already dead because the guy had decided to retire, and the realtor I called back who recommended that person said, I just did an appraisal a couple of months ago with him. I just received it. I had no idea he was retiring.
all right, so I guess,
I don't know if we can get another one.
all right, so we have, this wasn't sent to the committee members, but I can share it on the screen now before, if we are, we have it on our old business to take a vote on whether to pursue this appraisal or not. I think we need to figure out if this piece of property is, within, find out what the value is really, and, plug that into the estimate of what we're going to do for a new site and or renovation. So, I can pull this on the screen if,
And before you move forward, can I just say that I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion?
thank you, Erica. I'm just checking to see if it says anything about the location. Yeah, it does. So,
And don't screen share.
obviously.
I have a question for Mike, if that's possible. Did you reach out to Campbell Coyne by any chance? They're a realtor, but I think he does appraisals too.
I did not. I talked to appraisal companies all the way out to East Hartford and Windsor Locks. And even the ones that I talked to who said they were too busy, couldn't even give me a recommendation, or they recommended me back to the same first one person I got. It was very circular and not very productive.
Well, if you want, I can reach out to him to see whether or not they can do it, or they have someone who might be able to, if that would help.
Mike. Yes.
Who's talking?
I think it was.
Sorry, I'm double, I have a computer here. You have a cost? You have a cost for this? Is it?
$3,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I can't share the document because it's got the address on it.
Well, perhaps Ralph's suggestion would be good for comparison purposes also, if this person is currently appraising.
So I can reach out to them, Ralph. I'll send them the same information I sent the other people so we get a consistent information. I'm familiar with who you're talking about. Coin begins with a K, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I'll reach out to them, see if I can get another. Well, I will, for everyone's benefit, explain some of the feedback I got. There were residential appraisers, like the type of people, if you're doing a refi, I'm sure many people on this meeting have done a refinance recently or bought a house. There are a lot of residential appraisers around. And so you might be thinking, how is it possible that no one would give us a price? Most of the residential appraisers, and there are plenty around here, said to me that they would not participate in this because it's public funding, it's state funding, and it's a municipal project. And there are two different tiers of appraisers. There's appraisers that do residential, and there's appraisers who can also do commercial. And most of them felt that their errors and omissions insurance and their liability insurance would not support them doing a project like this, even though the property is potentially, most of the town of Willington is zoned residential. Because it was a public works type project, they felt they should not do the appraisal on those projects, that it should be done by a commercially certified appraiser, which again limited our group of available people. And then when I went further away, like to the Hartford area, everyone out there said, I'm not driving to Willington for that.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll have to table the vote until our next meeting unless members of the committee are comfortable voting on this single estimate based on the information that Mike shared with us. Maybe we could take a preliminary poll and see if we should vote tonight or put it on the agenda for our next meeting.
Is this important, very important for our next steps? In other words, is it better to have the information sooner than later?
I'm going to let Scott answer that, but I want to say yes, because we are trying to meet with the state. And that's one of the things that they want to know. They want to know, have you identified a new piece of property and how much is it? Scott.
Then I think I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Ann. Yeah, I mean, since you asked my opinion, yes, this is a critical milestone. We really need to first develop a cost to the land, one that we can meet with the state, but two, to then, be able to start having some active discussions with the potential landowner to agree on a final price. So, yeah, it's critical to move things forward. We've got to understand what the land costs and really confirm with the potential, purchase that the landowner is willing to enter into an agreement for X value.
Mhm. Then I think it's important we vote tonight then. My opinion.
Thank you, Anna.
I think for $3,000, when you're looking at the grand scheme and the scope of this and what a month delay would cost, I think, I don't think you're going to do much better. Just my history of seeing appraisals in the past, you might save a few $100s, but delay things another 2 or 3 weeks. And I think at this point, trying to move the project forward, the value that you have in hand is a fair value.
I
Yes,
also
thank you.
think it's important we do whatever we can to get to the state as soon as possible, because that's our next big step.
Yes. Thank you. And given the amount of work that Mike has already done on this, I would support that as well. Mike?
Respecting the taxpayer dollars, I really do want to get another price. However, I will point out the state is going to require us to have more than one appraisal. And so what's going to happen, let's just say we can find a second contractor, and let's say their price is $200 less or $200 more, whatever it is. We're going to end up hiring both of those contractors because we're going to have the minimum of 2 appraisals.
Right. Good point.
So the chance we're going to find 3 contractors and 2 of them are cheaper than this one is really, really slim.
But at this point, having that first appraisal to make, to really get to the point where we need a second appraisal to take it to the state and it's moving forward, we got to have that first one to start the discussion. That's
right.
fair.
And again, this is why this is a $3,000 appraisal as opposed to what you might have seen in your refi for your house might have been $500.
Right.
Because that was a residential that's a residential refi. It's a whole different world. Unfortunately, that's not the world we're in.
Thank you,
And
Mike.
they'll be assessing both properties.
No, that's for
No,
one
this is
piece of
just for
property.
the one, the potential one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you stay on the currently town-owned site for Hall Memorial School, an appraisal would not be required as part of the process.
Yeah, thank you.
Ralph? Ralph, did you have a comment? I saw your hand up.
I was just
Thanks, Norman.
going to express my sentiments that we should not move forward on this one until we at least make an effort to find a second appraiser.
Thank you. Peter?
I concur with Ralph and also with Mike. I think it's important to have the second appraisal. I understand that we need to move forward, but in the context of the general situation where we don't have our ed specs yet, which seems more critical to me than this appraisal, we should use the time to maintain the credibility of our committee and not violate the town's purchasing practices by having one bid.
That's absolutely not a violation of the town's purchasing policy. That you need 2 bids when you're over $5,000. You're under, I'm just gonna say Scott Pellman says that's a fair number. I'm assuming Scott Pellman is someone who has seen a lot of appraisals for land. I would say that it absolutely, number one, meets our town purchasing policy. And number 2, if we have to do 2 anyways, and Mike is called 7 places and gotten 1 response, and the number that Scott is saying is reasonable, why would we wait?
Right.
What are we
It could
waiting
go up.
for?
The price could go up, you know? I mean, that's the risk we take.
Well,
And Peter, hold on, Scott. Peter, I just wanted to say, you know, the appraisals, the ed specs, the community reach out, these are all concurrent things that the committee members are doing. It's not we're doing this activity and then we're doing this one, and then we're doing this one. These are all activities that are happening at the same time. And when we share that information publicly, we want it to be accurate. And right now it's just in draft mode. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the ed specs, but this isn't just a few pages. This is a whole school program that's put in a document that has square footages. It's got dimensions. It's got descriptions of what the space is used for. I mean, this is a collaborative effort, and I know that Phil and his group have been working hard on it. It's been tough these last few weeks with Summers and trying to get the committee members on the same page to nail down the ed specs, but I can assure you that task is happening at the same time as a bunch of these other tasks, much like all of our subcommittees. We've got our communications, our land assessment, and the finance subcommittee. Those are all concurrent activities. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not, we're not waiting for one activity to happen to get the next activity to happen. That's all. So go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. No, I'm all set. I'm all set. Thank you, Catherine.
All right, so we heard from a few members. I'm not sure where the numbers land. I know Ralph and Peter have suggested that we wait. We've got Mike and myself and Phil, you're not a voting member. So Mike, go ahead.
All right, I had to unmute. I move that we engage the one bidder we have and at the same time continue to pursue a second vendor so that we have someone on board for the next appraisal if it goes forward.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to approve. I can share the vendor.
The name of
right?
the vendor, yeah.
Yeah, it's RF Haggerty and Associates in the amount of $3,000. I can share some of the information. The completion time frame is 3 weeks from the date they receive authorization. We will receive a PDF version of the appraisal. They can also provide a hard copy. I think that's about it. Yeah, the full amount of 3,000 will be due. Yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve the cost proposal in the amount of $3,000 to RF Haggerty and Associates for an appraisal on a private property. Is there a second?
Can I ask a point of clarification? So are we asking them then to do the work?
Yes, this
Is that what this?
approval-
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Okay, discussion. We kind of just had it, but Ralph, go ahead.
All right, I'll support this as long as it's perfectly clear that we are going to pursue another appraisal, a second appraisal. Otherwise, I would vote no, absolutely no.
Okay, thank you. I think we have to, based on what Scott and Mike were just saying. Peter?
I want to disagree respectfully. I think it's bad optics for us to sole source any service to this committee, and I will vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Mike?
Two clarifications. One, we have a motion on the floor, not on the table. I think it's important that we get that right because technically motion on the table means we're tabling it. So I just want to be clear on that. We have a motion on the floor. Second of all, I completely understand Pete and Ralph's concerns about having one vendor to pick from. But again, supporting what Phil said, it is not sole sourcing. Sole sourcing is a different technical beast. And when you have 6 non-responsive bidders out of 7, it's not sole sourcing. I put a ton of effort into trying to find someone, and we exercised all sorts of local professional help from significant local realtors. And I said, like I said, all the way out through East Hartford, called realtors saying, please tell us someone who can do this. And so there was a huge effort put into it. This is not a fly by night end result. This is days and days and days of phone calls and emails, and 2 weeks later getting phone calls back. We're in a very odd situation, and otherwise I would not support this either. But having been the one who made most of those phone calls and emails, I can tell you we're going to have a hard time even finding the second one. But I will keep pursuing it.
Thank you, Mike. Any other discussion on this before we vote?
I could tag team with you if you want on the phone calls.
Yeah, let me get started again, and I'll certainly be happy to have you help.
Okay.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Mike. All right, let's take a vote. We have a motion on the floor and a second on the floor. We've had discussion, and now we're going to vote. I'm going to do a roll call vote. So we'll start, Anne,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Peter,
No.
Ralph,
Aye.
and I am a yes. So motion carries. We'll proceed with RF Hagerty and Associates Incorporated to pursue our appraisal for the private property. All right, so that takes care of old business. Item C, we'll move on to new business. Public feedback session and survey. So I'll leave, I believe this one's gonna be talked about by Scott.
Hi, Catherine. Yeah, well, I had just posed the question and was looking at a previous survey that Phil, I believe, had put together a few years back, just looking at what support there may be for a project. So I had sent that previous survey back to Catherine and Phil and just inquired, is it time? Would we want to take a look at the questions that were posed in that survey? May ask that the committee review those questions, maybe modify those questions, but did it make sense at this juncture to put a survey back out to start gathering some baseline information from the public?
Exactly. Do you have that survey, Phil, that we can show on the screen and see if our committee members have any additional questions that we should ask? And then as far as while he's finding that, I'm gonna talk about the public feedback session. We had talked about scheduling a few dates. I know there was an earlier request to have at least 4 dates out there. We hadn't nailed down a specific number of dates. We were going to start with 1, maybe 2, and then go from there. and see what the town warrants. If it may end up being 6, it may end up being 5. But we wanted to at least nail down a couple dates, and I'm not sure if we've done that yet. Scott, have we chosen a date in July that tentative couple?
No,
tentative
we haven't locked any dates down because we're still waiting on some of these key milestones to happen so we could determine with the committee's help what the committee wanted to put out to the public. So I think, you know, a critical milestone 1 is going to be the ed spec, hopefully confirmation, you know, next Tuesday from the Board of Ed. Also potentially getting a land appraisal or getting those discussions to a point where we can physically start talking about the 2 specific options, private parcel, public parcel, side by side.
And we're just not there yet.
Is it important to have been to the state before we begin or no?
We'll continue to pursue that. You know, I have had on another project a meeting with the state. I think I may have reported to this committee on that discussion. The state, you know, has sort of changed the approach from what was being dictated from previous administrations, in saying it's really up to the town to determine what project they feel they want to submit as far as a grant application, with the understanding of what some of those implications may be from a funding standpoint if you're way over on the state standard. You know, there are opportunities to go for space waivers. You know, I do think that we wanted to get an understanding from the state, again, on the trust situation. We want to make sure that that is clarified. We do not want to go all the way down the path of pursuing a renovation option if the state had some very specific criteria associated with that trust, as well as just discussing the land. So I know Phil had mentioned, I believe earlier, that he has, again, as of early as of today, reached back out to the state department. So again, we're hoping to have that conversation.
Thank you.
So getting back to Ann's question, then it sounds like we're waiting for.
Yeah, I don't think the state discussion is necessarily critical as long as we frame it that we are still waiting to have that discussion. So
Yeah.
there would be some, you know, conditions. We could say, these are the 2 things, again, that we're looking at, 2 options we're looking at.
Yeah.
With the understanding we're confirming the following.
But we would certainly have better information to present in a public session after we've met with OSCGR, right?
I think that would also prevent, if we present something now that the state may not approve, it gets confusing.
Yeah.
I think if we wait until we know what the state is going to authorize us to do and what they will reimburse us for, I guess is the important thing.
Yeah.
And then we present that to the public.
Yeah, if I may, again, I just want to be careful on the language we use. The state is not going to authorize that we do a specific option, but they will comment on funding support for the option that we're presenting.
Right.
Thank you.
So certainly the second half of this meeting agenda regarding the survey, I think we can discuss that this evening to see if there are any other survey questions that the committee members thinks we should add to the survey. And as far as I know, there's nothing holding us back from sending out this survey to get some feedback from our townspeople.
Want to share what was there, Catherine?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the survey that went out, these are the questions. How familiar are you with the 2017 facility study that was completed? I'm not sure how relevant that is to our current work. Question 2 is, how familiar are you with the facility needs and the process the school board is using to find solutions? Question 3 was, I would only support performing the minimum needed building maintenance projects. Question 4 was, I would support having all students in one preschool through grade 8 school. Question 5 was, I would support renovating to like new condition 1 of our schools. Question 6 was, I would support building 1 new preschool through grade 8 built school. Question 7 was, I would support building 1 new preschool through grade 5 school and paying for students in grades 6 through 8. And they would be basically sent out to another district. Question 8 was, I believe a renovated or new building would attract new families to Willington. And then there was a ranking for certain items: energy efficiency, outside field space, and so on and so forth. And then there was an option for just some general comments. And it was based upon the options that were sent to the board initially. What I did was I took those before coming to the committee tonight, I tried to revamp this before Ann and I take a shot at this to get some feedback from the committee about what you are looking to ask. Just giving some general information about and again, this is a draft. There could be typos in this. There's generic dates in here. The purpose of your charge is really for a preschool through grade 8 building, whether that's renovated or new. And so I just said, see the FAQ document, here's where you can find information, share your email, and then really kept it down to 2 things, which I'm not so sure these 2 questions make sense right now for people without having any price, any understanding of what this means to go to 1. But really we're talking about what the SBC has been talking about is renovating Hall School or supporting a new preschool through grade 8 building on a new site. The other items that you could do is the attribute ranking that you could use. You could do this again and take this feedback for the ed specs. You could add this in. We have this information already. You'd be getting it again. The only thing I added in was the auditorium with seating for approximately 500. The board has discussed this. That's something that they may say, can we do that as a potential add-on? Because we know seating for 500 is 8 to 10,000 square feet. It's significant. So this is what it is right now. Additional comments. I don't know at this point in time if this is going to be super useful or not to folks.
Any discussion? Peter?
Yeah, a couple of things. Do we have that survey in our Google file, Phil?
Which survey? The one that was done prior?
The one you just showed us, yeah.
The first document I showed you, yes. The second one I just did as a draft, no.
Oh, so the second one is new.
It's brand new. The
Okay.
only thing it's 2 questions. Honestly, it's 2 questions. Do you support the renovation or do you support a new building? Agree or disagree? And then the same, what we'll call aesthetic or features are the same except for the addition of the auditorium.
Great, thank you. I'd like to review both and have a chance to come up with ideas for that, as I'm sure the rest of the committee would as well. More important to me is the outreach meetings Scott alluded to. And I'm thinking that as these milestones occur, as Catherine said, concurrently, at some point, we can evaluate both concepts, new and renovation, as a committee, with the ed specs applied, with the appraisal applied, and all the other extraneous data Scott can apply. I would think if we knew those 2 concepts clearly ourselves as a committee, it would then be easier to go forward to a outreach, meeting or series of meetings with the community. But I'd be curious to hear Scott's reaction to that.
I agree. Again, it's a matter of, do we have enough meaningful information that, it can be, provided to the community. And again, I think we really need to know we have the two viable options. I certainly don't want to have a meeting with the public and have that generate more questions than we have answers, because I think that would be a disservice to everyone's time. Certainly the public's time and this committee's time. So again, that's why, I think it's critical, get the ed spec approved. Let's get the appraisal. Let's get the land to a point where, hopefully in the very near future, we can start talking about it a little bit more openly. And at that point, then we can put, concept plans, some potential budgets. Once we know our square footage that we're basing the new building or renovated building, renovating 2 square footages and program spaces. Once we have that confirmed, we should be able to generate quite a bit of material for some of those initial discussions.
What does the rest of the committee feel about that? As far as, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I hear what Scott is saying with respect to let's get all the information and share it with the public so that we have some solid data. But I'm also on the side of the townspeople who may or may not know what the heck we've been doing. And I think we need to get in front of the townspeople and let them know, here are some of the things that we've been doing over the past year. We don't have all the answers. Some of the stuff is going to be in draft form. We're still working on it. I don't know. I'm like I said, I've got a perspective on both sides. I'd like to hear from the committee members to see if they think it's too soon for us to go out in front of the public with to get their feedback, or we should wait until we get more data that Scott was suggesting. Ralph, what do you think?
Okay, well, first, I want to speak to one of the questions and one word that I hate seeing in any kind of a survey, and that's the word renovation. That's not what we're talking about with Hall School. We're talking about a reconfiguration plus addition as new. It is not just simply a renovation of the existing building. It won't be. We don't have adequate space to do just a renovation. And I think it has the wrong connotation in the eyes of the public. So let's come up with a better phrase, but let's get the word renovation either clarified or out of the picture and talk about a reconfiguration plus addition to like new condition, please.
If I may, Catherine, the state defines it as an AE alteration extension. So if you pursued this, the grant application would be for an AE project, alteration extension with a submission to renovate as new.
That's fair. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We all know what a renovation implies, but I respect what Ralph is saying, because he's absolutely right. It's not a simple renovation. There has to be some reconfiguration going on. So to be consistent with how the state words their documentation and their application, if alteration / extension meets what Ralph is saying, I take no issue with it. I don't.
It's public perception. That's all. That's what's going to be very important here.
You're right.
And if people are just thinking all we're doing is renovating the existing building as it sits, that's wrong. That's not what the plan would entail. Okay, I've said my piece.
Thank you. Anyone else? Peter, you look like you want to say something.
I do, Catherine, thanks.
Erica, I'm going to jump
Erica.
to Erica. I see her hand up and she's waving over there. Hang on one second, Peter.
So I think renovate to new is the term we've been using all along. Alteration, extension, although that may be the term that the state uses. I think part of our job is to educate people to what that renovate to new would mean and what it would include. And that's where the public outreach, I think, is important. I think it's too soon for our survey. I think we don't have enough data to present to them to help them understand what choice we would possibly be asking them for at this point. I think, Peter, hold on to your hat. I think we agree. We need more information in order to go to the townspeople to say, do you prefer choice A or choice B without any dollars? We need those dollars. And so I know the land piece, the ed spec piece, all go together. And so I think we need to have that before we put out a survey, because I think it's important that we put out a survey in multiple ways. Some of that is going to have a cost involved in it in a paper survey, whether we did every door to door, we do some electronic. And so I want us to be wise about how we get the most input back from our residents, and then couple that with some public outreach. I'm not opposed to public outreach prior to a survey. I think that can help them understand where we're at now and help understand what our residents' idea of what our work has been thus far. It seems, some come on here and tell us that we're dragging our feet and purposely moving slowly. I think we would hear the opposite if we were moving extremely quickly. We are doing our due diligence. These things don't happen overnight. And we've got an unusual situation in our ownership of one of our current buildings that doesn't make it as clean and clean cut as maybe some other towns. So, but I think we could still hold a public outreach to have some open discussion with residents and this committee to see, where they stand. I myself, as a resident, as the first selectman, as a person in this committee, couldn't answer those questions in a survey because we don't have enough data. We don't have enough information.
Thank you, Erica. Peter?
I can't waste this opportunity to say I'm in concurrence with both Erica and Ralph. And I am. But I just want to add to that a third leg that maybe we can keep on the agenda, as I think it's on the minds of parents in Willington, and that is the swing space in either scenario.
Yes.
How that would work, where their children would be during either potential project. And I think we can start discussing that now, can't we? Or at least once we, so if we can make that a potential agenda item and get Scott's input and start looking at that more carefully, that might help us develop both tracks.
Great, thank you, Peter. I will add it to next meeting's agenda. Any other discussion? Mike?
I like where this is going. I think that as I was watching that survey that Phil was presenting it, I was thinking about not only how we get people to participate in the survey, other than the people who are already actively paying attention. How do we get further out? And also, how do we get our information further out? So that even before we have a public Q&A, how do we get to more people and get the information out to them? And so maybe outreach before the survey really is critical so that more people might answer it and more people might have information to answer it with, might have a reaction because they've gotten information. So, maybe as someone who tends to be a talker myself, I know that we can all talk these things to death and we can get caught up in debate and discussion all night. So maybe we should have some sort of a scripted electronic presentation that, because it's scripted, it can also go out by email and other forms. So we get different groups of people that way, and do it like a YouTube thing. Instead of having a Zoom where everyone's asking questions and we spend the whole night bogged down on answering, maybe one of these things should just be a straight one-directional presentation, similar to the FAQs, but presented by a person reading from a script saying, here's the update of the steps we've taken. Here's the update of where we are right now. Here are the paths we see we're going on. And just basically a kind of a summary of where the process is up to now and where we see it going, and hope that that helps spread the information around the community. And then by the time it's time for the survey, we will hopefully have more people interested and they would have more information to have thought about.
That's a great idea, Mike. I sense a volunteer opening for you. If you want to be our spokesperson.
Don't we have a communications subcommittee already that I'm not?
Open to communication.
Do you want to join? Mike, do you want to join?
No, that's fine.
I'm just teasing. That's a great idea. Any other feedback? Ralph, I see your hand up.
Yes, again. I think Mike's onto something.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with that. A YouTube presentation of where the committee is by a member of the committee. No offense, Scott. I think it has to be a local person who does any kind of a presentation to the voters in this town. That's all.
Thank you, Ralph. Anybody else? Phil, do you have any feedback?
None.
He's afraid to volunteer for something.
So I'm wondering, I think, Mike, you're definitely onto something here. I'm wondering if this would warrant putting a task committee to complete this task. It is a single item, much like we've done in the past, where we have a few members of our committee joining a task group to get this off the ground and start moving forward with it. We could start, Mike and Ralph, would you guys be willing to be on a task committee? A task group, we'll call it a task group.
For creating the YouTube presentation, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Ralph, what do you think? Are we sucker enough for that?
I don't know. I suppose I can get talked into it.
I'll join you. I'll join you.
Yeah, I think it would be, I hear Ralph saying, it needs to be our committee that presents this, but I think part of what our owner, our OPM does for us is help us with that public outreach. So their assistance in making sure that we're not missing something, I think is really important, but that it be our faces, our voice, and our communication. So we own it, but I think utilizing them as a resource is important. So I don't want to write off that expertise.
I would agree with Erica. Oh my God, I said that?
There'll be a ceremony after this meeting for all of this agreement down the middle row of the Hollywood Square stand.
It's gonna get
Yeah, can
documented.
we wrap this up on a good note?
Yeah, Catherine,
We're done.
Catherine, I would be happy to be involved also. And
Excellent. All right.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're gonna create a task group for our YouTube. I don't, what are we gonna call it? YouTube information,
Public outreach.
what is
public
it?
outreach.
Public outreach. I mean, this is, I see it as a part of our communications subcommittee, but it's a little bit different. This is specifically public outreach.
And I'm sorry, I know this came out of a discussion of the team members, but maybe this falls under new business. It's kind of falling under the discussion about the survey, which resulted from it.
I think it's a direct link to the public feedback session.
Okay,
Agreed.
So we're just,
Agreed.
we're promoting or suggesting a virtual public to start public feedback session. That's all. So I think this is appropriate within this item of business.
okay.
I think in our first get together, I think with Scott's help, we can come up with a storyboard and which person should tackle which portion of any presentation. I think each of us has our own credibility in particular areas, and that would be, I think, appropriate.
So over the next couple of weeks, I can send out a meeting invitation to the members, and then we'll get started that way. And we could talk about the roles of what this public outreach video is going to entail. So jumping back to the meeting minutes, we did talk about public feedback session. It sounds like a majority of the committee members feel it's too soon. And as far as the survey, as you know, we are going to create a task group to, not the survey, I'm sorry. Let me go back. The survey is too soon because we don't have enough information. The public feedback session will be created as a task group. All right, so we'll move down to new business, the CIP funding request for consultants. So this is very similar to the funding request that we had asked for back in, I want to say it was in February. We had asked for the 100,000 that was earmarked in the funding request for consultants. And that's what we are using to pay for Colliers and among other items that are necessary for this committee to move forward, AKA an appraisal, recording secretary, as we thought we were going to be paying for that. So this next request is very similar. There was another 100,000 that was earmarked in the latest Board of Education budget that we now have to request for us to use it for consultants for the rest of this year. So Phil, I don't know if you,
Clarification. I think what you meant, I hope what you meant to say was there's $100,000 in the capital budget that's effective July 1st.
yeah, what did I say? I'm sorry.
You said the Board of Education budget.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
it's in the capital, improvement plan budget.
Right, which is effective as of July 1, approved.
Right.
Yes,
So
okay,
this
thank you.
line item is just to request the use of those funds. And I don't know if we have, Phil, do you happen to have the draft of, you sent
Can I
it to
make
me?
a motion? I want to make a motion that we could, so potential discussion. I want to move that the school building committee respectfully request the Board of Finance to ask the Board of Selectmen to hold a town meeting to appropriate $100,000 from the reserve fund to project number 4.14041 for school building committee consultants as previously approved by voters at the annual town meeting 2022-2023. The funds will be utilized to hire consultants to assist the SBC with the review of options, including but not limited to renovation, addition, or a new school, and any other items needed to assist the SBC in fulfilling their charge.
Second.
All right, discussion? Erica?
Sorry, Phil muted me again. So that's the same motion that was used for the last set of dollars. You had a discussion earlier where two discussions actually in both Scott's update and in an old business regarding the appraiser, the difficulties in obtaining services. We're finding that in multiple things within the town as well, where we've had to seek out direct solicitations of items because there's a lot of work out there to be had. It's a lot harder to find consultants. So things may take a little bit longer. I'd like Scott to help us understand what monies we would need moving forward from a referendum, if we held the referendum in the fall, that we would need, and that we have these funds in the event we are ready to move forward.
Thank you, Erica. Any other discussion on the item before we vote? So Erica, we are going to be presenting that same language that we requested of the Board of Finance, which is what you just read. We would just depend after this vote, we would basically take that letter and request it of the Board of Finance.
My motion would be yes.
You'll email it to me as chairman of the Board of Finance, and I'll add it to the agenda.
Okay. All right, so we're still in discussion. I don't know, Ralph, Peter, you want to duke it out? Which one do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Ralph.
All right, my only question is, didn't we get 100,000 in the last fiscal year? And where do we stand? What's the balance? How much of that have we spent? Those questions are going to be asked.
Yep.
And we're asking for a second slug of money of 100,000. Somebody's going to ask, well, what'd you do with what we previously gave you? Where'd that money go?
Right, well, we hired an OPM, so that's the simple answer.
No, but that's not a number.
Right, no, I get it.
That's what I want to get at.
Right. Yep, so we can add that to our request if we can add that to the Board of Finance request, just the balance is.
And is that money, is whatever's in that balance still available to us?
Right.
Mike would know the answers to all these questions, I'm sure, but the public's going to ask that without a doubt.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I can share that with Mike when I send the request. I can share the balance. The previous amount approved for our use was 100,000. We've created a purchase order to Colliers in this amount. We've created a purchase order to the guy that did our enrollment study, Prouda. We've spent that. The appraisal can be on there too, and then we could do a summary balance. And then Mike, as the chairperson of the Board of Finance, he can share that with his committee. But thank you for your comment, Ralph. Peter?
I guess I'm following up on Ralph's questions. I'm uncomfortable voting on this, not knowing roughly where we are in the first disbursement of that first 100,000. I feel foolish, almost. Shame on me for not, I guess, adding it all up before this meeting.
You're the chair of our finance committee.
I know, but do we have any idea is my first question. And then I'm thinking about what I think Phil may have said earlier, where maybe some sort of public meeting wouldn't be a bad idea before we post for a town meeting to ask for more money and tell them what we've done. Would that kind of timeline make sense before we ask the Board of Selectmen to set a meeting? A, we've spent this amount of money, and B, what do you guys think, town? And C, okay, we'll go to the Board of Finance and get more money because we need to proceed.
Well, if you want to do the math real quick, I can tell you what we've spent so far, and these are just rough numbers. And Scott, maybe you can help me out with your PO. I think it was 67,000. And then we had 2,500 roughly for our enrollment study, and then another 3,000 upcoming for this appraisal. We did not have any money come out for the recording secretary, but correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we only have those 3 POs. So 67, so 70.
72.5.
Yeah, 72.5 is what, minus the 100,000.
I believe ours was 64.8, Catherine, was the purchase order that was issued.
Okay,
So
so.
we're roughly at $70,000 that has been committed.
Okay, so we have 30,000 left roughly.
And you know, you've got pending potentially 5,000 for a phase 1 ESA.
Yeah,
Depending on what's found out there, that could go to a phase 2, and a phase 2 would be quite a bit more.
yeah. That was 3,000 or 5,000?
5,000 for both schools.
Okay, so now we're down
Both
to
sites.
5. Now we're down to 25, I'm sorry. Right? So if it was 70 before, that left us with 30 minus 5, so it's 25,000.
That's what I thought.
The actual expenses, we can get you a report. I can get a report from our
Well-
finance office tomorrow. That's not a problem.
I can
Yeah,
ask
I
a
mean-
follow-up question, Catherine, to my question. Can we survive on 25,000 and have some sort of public outreach meeting saying, hi, everybody, we spent this money, we've done these things. Here's our future agenda, and we're going to be asking the Board of Selectmen for a town meeting for you to approve that. Might be a good way to touch base with the community.
Yeah, yep, no, that's a good point. I guess the only concern I would have is that depending on our when our public outreach is, let's say it's not till the middle of August, are we gonna be caught in a situation where we're gonna need it sooner? And we
Well,
don't know how long it's gonna take to
That's
get
what I was wondering.
approval.
How long can we live on 25,000?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, but quite frankly, I don't want to risk it. It took about 4 months. We had to present that request to the Board of Finance multiple times before it got approved. So I don't know how long. I think we're just trying to consider the process here, and
I think if you did a reasonable PR thing like Peter's talking about, prior to asking for the town meeting and Board of Finance approval, the process would be a lot more expedited. I
Yeah.
think the reason that we suffered the last time was because of poor public's perception of what was happening.
so
And
maybe it's, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all. I think that would help.
So maybe
So,
it's not a,
Catherine,
public meeting per se. Maybe like Ralph said, it's a maybe an update, like a maybe a post.
Mike.
I
Mike,
think it would be appropriate if this committee were to vote to move this forward, in the communication to the Board of Finance and the actual meeting, where then you're asking them for this to move it forward to town meeting. We have all of those answers and we have prepared documentation for them. And in my just started this discussion, I asked Scott to talk to us about what other things we might need as we get to the next step. And that's what we would want these funds for. And we have those answers. So if we have all of that as we go to the Board of Finance and we go to town meeting, we are prepared to answer those questions from the public.
thank you, Erica. Mike?
Also, just looking at schedule, we're looking at probably the middle of August anyway. Because if, assuming the request came in advance of the next Board of Finance meeting, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my calendar on the wall here. Next Board of Finance meeting is July 21st. So if the request was on the agenda and the Board of Finance made the motion to move it to the Board of Selectmen, it would then go to the Board of Selectmen meeting on August 7th, I believe. I'm sorry, August 8th. See, that's what happens when you're reading the calendar from too far away. We'll go to Board of Selectmen potentially August 8th. So the earliest would be then, if they went to call a town meeting, would be some point after August 8th.
I'll just let you know there, it's very possible if we went, the Board of Selectmen has other things for town meeting. So there may be a town meeting sooner than that, Mike, just based on some of our other items that have been waiting for town meeting. So it doesn't mean this has to go on that next town meeting.
Right.
But it's possible to be earlier than that the Board of Selectmen will move sooner than that.
So you're saying the Board of Selectmen might potentially call a meeting sooner than the August 8th meeting?
Because we already have a couple of items for town meeting.
Gotcha.
Anne?
So does the Board of Selectmen need to approve it before it goes to the town meeting? No, okay, that's good. The other suggestion I have, I think this is a great opportunity for a quick, concise update, you know, even that night where we let everybody know where we are and what's happened so far and what's happening in the future before they vote.
Yeah, and that's, I know we had the Willington Wire published in April. We're now in July, so it might be an opportunity for us to mimic something that was done for the Willington Wire. And it can be posted on our Facebook page or any other spots that we need it. Phil?
I mean, I'm just reflecting back of what you wrote, Catherine, and I might be wrong. You had written a letter to the Board of Finance in the very last, it was probably a page and a half, I thought. In the first part of the letter, just had shared what the money was going to be for. I think if you do the same thing, I agree with Erica here, that if you do the same thing and give the update to the Board of Finance about how we've spent our money, what's coming up, and with the feedback from Scott, and then make the request, I think you're giving, like you said, the snapshot of the same thing that's been in the Willington Wire. It's just targeted now towards the dollars, how you're going to spend that money.
Thank you, Phil. Peter?
Catherine, I guess I'm a bit confused. What would be the difficulty in having some sort of actual public meeting in July where we could just report?
Like a public,
If all this can't happen till August anyway, we have the balance of July. What's preventing us from doing that and being very transparent to avoid the fiasco of the first town meeting we had like this? I'm just asking that question. Like we have virtually all of July and early August.
right, so let's say we create a public session now. What is going to be on the agenda for the public session? Just an update for the board, for the request for funds? I mean, what else? What other items?
Well, if the YouTube gang were ready, we could say what we've done what we had done so far.
Yeah, I think that might take some time, though.
I agree. I agree.
You want to be on the YouTube gang?
No, Catherine, I do not. But
I like
I,
the idea. I just, I'm not sure what else we would talk about besides that, how the money was spent and the upcoming spends if we don't have the solid data that we need to share with the public.
I don't think that would be insufficient, but that's just me. I'm curious to know what others think. I'm just always wanting to be transparent.
As are we. I think that's our goal on this committee is to share what we have, but it's important to share accurate information. If you share inaccurate information or stuff that's not been finalized, it creates confusion. I mean, we've all heard it. We've heard some information that people are saying that's just frankly not true.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so currently there's a motion on the floor. I can't read everything that Erica presented, but I think Mike seconded it, right? Okay, so we have gone into discussion already. And are we prepared to take a vote? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote. Erica,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes,
Peter,
No,
Mike,
Yes.
Ralph,
Aye.
and myself, yes. And I think that's it. Motion carries. So we will present the same document with some additional data on how the money was spent and what the upcoming spends are. I'll send that information to you, Mike, as the chair of the Board of Finance to make that request.
Catherine, I will communicate with you and Peter as the Finance Subcommittee Chair, a report from our Finance Office so that you both have that.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to item 9, future business. This is reserved for our items for a future agenda. We've already talked about one item that Peter mentioned earlier to be added to the agenda, which is,
Swing space.
I have a list, Catherine. Swing space, outreach.
survey, the YouTube. No, it was something that, yeah, swing space, thank you, in either scenario. Were there any other agenda items that the committee members would like us to add?
This is yes agenda, future business. So we talked about moving to hybrid meetings. And I said at that point, I thought it was important that our committee commit to getting back to meeting in person. That from my perspective, the best part of the hybrid meeting is to allow our public to be able to attend when they couldn't be in the room. This is the second meeting. I think it's just been Phil and I. So there has been no further commitment from our committee, but it looks like you're all in your homes here in Willington to be in person. So if the committee's not going to meet in person, we might as well go back to full remote. There's no one in the room from the public. And it's just Phil and I think we could easily attend from somewhere else. I personally would like to see our committee together in the same place as much as possible. But if that's not going to happen, I'd rather see us go to full Zoom.
All right, we'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting discussion. Just something for us to think about, Erica, can we consider just continuing to do hybrid? Or are you're
It's fine, but I mean,
Yeah.
I could easily attend from seven. So if I choose not, if my hybrid, if I choose like the rest of you do, to not attend here in the town office building, and someone from the public comes, who's going to be here? Right? So now the commitment is that, you know, Phil and I are here in the event someone from the public comes. But my hope was that our committee would be together. The Board of
Yeah.
Selection is meeting in person. I think the best part of hybrid is to allow our residents to be able to attend in multiple ways. I think it's, from my perspective, I think it's time our committees get back to meeting in person. That's my take on it. But if that's not going to happen and our committee is going to continue, Phil and I happen to work in this building, so we're here. But is the expectation that we're going to be the ones that are here? If we weren't, who would, if we chose to stay hybrid and not in person, who's going to be in charge of this meeting? So I think that's something we have to take a look at from the committee's perspective. I've already communicated with you that I will not be in person at the next meeting. I will, as much as I can, and I'll spare you all while I'm not joining, that, you know, I'll attend as much as I can hybrid. So if I'm not here and Phil weren't able to be in the building, somebody else has to open the building for the public. So we need to be prepared for what a hybrid meeting looks like if Phil and Erica aren't here in the room. Or just go to full Zoom. Again, there's no member of the public here either. So both times we've met, there's no members of the public. And I think it's become apparent that our public finds it much easier to attend town meetings as a whole from wherever it is they sit. So we just need to decide one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Any other agenda items for our next meeting? Okay. So our next item on the agenda is present to speak. James, thank you for having your hand up so long. I'm assuming you are a member of the public that would like to speak. So this is your opportunity.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road. You know, I thank you for hearing me. I don't want to be presumptuous, but I suspect my application and my interest in potentially being a part of the committee and my application might have been what was referenced at the beginning of this meeting. I apologize for not presenting to speak earlier, but I was unaware it was even going to be a subject of discussion, you know, during this hearing. So that being said, I do understand at least the, you know, the requirements, but I want to say I am an architect by trade. I have a focus in educational design. I do K through 12 schools for a living. I do a lot of feasibility efforts related to new school construction and proposals. You know, I am here to assist. I know I've seen some of you guys at these meetings before. Any help I can be, I would be happy to do so. So I just wanted to say, you know, thank you for considering my application. And figured I should show my face. And I apologize, I'm on a phone instead of a computer today because, yeah, this caught me by surprise a little bit. Anyway, so thank you. If I may, I have a couple of questions as well, just related to general timing and where you guys are at. Do we have, I agree the ed spec is very important. It's one of your most critical pieces of information here. I appreciate the fact that you guys are rolling through with some due diligence on site selection, et cetera. But just wondering if we have a timeline on, you know, the development of that ed spec and, you know, where that process is at generally. I know we keep mentioning it's coming. I may not be up to date in some of these minutes, but any input, just out of curiosity?
Well, typically the present to speak is.
Oh, yes, I apologize.
Yeah, however, we can certainly add that timeline update to our next
Perfect.
agenda meeting. And we will have Scott outline where we're currently at with the steps in our outline. So thank you, James.
Perfect.
Did you have
That'd be
another
great.
question?
I have, yeah, one or two more actually. I also, just for consideration, not necessarily a question since that's not appropriate. You know, I would agree that it's not necessarily an appropriate point for a survey on where this process is, but I'd ask if, if there's been any consideration of input from the public in the creation of the educational specification, has there been any community outreach specific to that effort related to visioning, what the community residents feel would be an appropriate direction for the, ideal vision of the school moving forward? I think that would help to generate a lot of public support, knowing that they have some buy-in in that process for what, could serve this community moving forward. And to that end, I think, and again, just some of the topics spoke today, that the swing space, although it will be a critical decision-making point, without that ed spec, it's kind of premature to even really know. You don't know what that need will be. So, taking time and commitment for that agenda item might be a little premature, in my personal opinion. And then, yeah, so thank you very much, guys. I hope, like I said, if there's ever a need, I'm happy to help. And thank you guys for your efforts and for sticking with this process. I know it's not easy. So I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, James. Nicholas Tella.
Nicholas Della, 49 Myrtle. Wrote down some things throughout the meeting here. So to me, it makes no sense that we're spending $3,000 on something we don't know what the state's going to contribute as far as any of the options available. The board doesn't even know what they need in the form need in the school as far as ed specs. Seems like there's not any details on that situation. From the outside looking in, because I'm catching up to this, so I've only reached out to other people that have been following it. But from the outside looking in, it looks like you guys are just spending and are completely unorganized. Let's see. So it looks like you guys are just asking for $100,000 from the taxpayers, and then you come back and ask for another $100,000 and so, or whatever it may be. How about we create a plan of knowing how much we actually need and pitch it to the taxpayer, and instead of just asking for $100,000 at a time, when it's going to be more than that. It comes across very poorly. It seems like you're trying to sneak projects through without the taxpayer knowing what the true cost will be. So, and I know you're going to be pitching it to the public, so this is somebody that's not really following it, and the other people you pitch to in the public aren't really following it. So just my perception. Perception is reality usually.
James, thank you, Nick. James, it looks like your hand is up. Did you want to speak again?
Yeah. Sorry, humor me for one more minute, if I may, just mostly to respond to Mr. Tella's comment. I mean, I think, not to respond directly, but I think it might be beneficial, particularly as you go before, as you're considering public outreach and awareness, and specifically related to the funding request. It would be beneficial, if you were able to look ahead and project, probably with the assistance of your PM, what the ultimate long-term additional funding needs may be for this project. There are definable tasks that you can start to identify at least what these funds will be used for, because, the open-ended, yes, it will be for anything related to this project. It's just, it's harder for people to get behind and rally support unless they know where it's going for. And this is people also don't understand how complicated a process this is. It's a multi-stage effort. There are many steps of the puzzle that require professional assistance. It's not just the land assessment. It'll eventually be designer selection, as a part of the state submission, et cetera. So it would be beneficial. I think it would serve you well if you were able to start to map out what those requests were and what those ultimate funding requirements might be. So you can at least plan from a bigger picture perspective instead of year by year, or request by request for an ill-defined topic or need. So that's it. Thank you again, and thank you for hearing me, guys.
Thank you,
Have a
James.
good night.
Thank you. Any other public to speak? I thought I saw somebody waving their hand. Matt?
Matt, you're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, when people come to the meetings, they're present to speak, please don't interrupt them. It's not good. If they're saying something wrong, address it in the meeting, but don't interrupt. Regarding the walking of the hall school land, I don't know if that's going to be done during normal business hours or whether or not it's going to be done after hours. I would recommend that in order to increase public participation, that you hold that when people can actually attend it, which would be after regular business hours. And regarding the items on the agenda, you know, I know I sound like a jerk, but don't put items on the agenda that aren't going to be discussed. You file these things two days before, and there's no reason to have placeholders. It's confusing to the townspeople. I don't know why you would do that. And then lastly, regarding the outreach discussion, I thought was really good. You can advertise in hard copy. You can advertise in social media groups. You can advertise using outdoor. You can outreach to the senior center. All of those things will increase participation. And you can, we have an outgoing email address list as well. All those things will increase participation. And you can also do, by the way, if provided you want to spend the money, you can do a mail survey. It'll get 100% distribution to every household in Willington. It's old fashioned and it's expensive, but that's one way to ensure that you got input from everyone who wanted to respond. Thank you for allowing me to say my comments.
Okay, any other public to speak?
Before you go, Catherine.
All right, one more time. Any other public to speak?
Catherine, can I just mention that the Board of Education next week will be discussing ed specs. Those will come out of the Board of Ed and it's on their agenda for next week. So I think it's important if we say that here so folks know.
You have the date of, is that on a Tuesday?
Tuesday the 12th. Is that correct? Yes, Tuesday the 12th.
Thank you. And our next meeting will be July 20th. All right, if there's no other present to speak, we'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Mike, Erica, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Have a good night. It's 8:20.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you very much, everybody.
8:25.
Yeah.